Please welcome today's speaker, Duncan Wood.
As Ellie mentioned, my title is tongue-in-cheek, very much so, but from rock God to real God. And in our Bible study today, we were actually having a chat about this in some ways, how society worships rock gods or personalities. And really what happens in life, and it happened to me, is that we are attracted to that in some way. We take our talents, but sometimes our talents take us down a different path that maybe we should. So for those who don't know, I was a non-Christian for 40 years of my life, and so I'm now 55, so I've been a Christian for 15 years now. So just a very quick recapture of my life and some interesting pictures for you to see as well, which will make some of you laugh. But I started off, I'm a son of a 10-pound immigrant. I have 3 siblings who are older than I. So I was the first one born in Australia. So my parents paid the £10 back in 1958-59 to come to Australia, as many of those from the UK did, and they came to Brisbane. And I was born about 9 months later when they arrived. So I'm the only one in the family who was actually born Australian. All my siblings were born in Scotland, from Aberdeen, actually, of all places. So had a typical life until I was about 11 years old. And at that point, my father sadly contracted cancer and died. And then about a year and a half later, my mother died from a brain hemorrhage. So I was dealt a bit of a hand, but that happens in life. But my father was Calathumpian, he'd call himself, so he was fairly much a non-Christian, whereas my mother was a Catholic, but not a practicing Catholic. We didn't really go to church. But the first time I met Jesus was actually back in about 1965, I think it was, 64. And I went to a very small church, which by coincidence is 3 doors down from where we first started filming our TV shows for GNU. And the building is still there. Actually, I had a picture, but I couldn't find it to show this morning. But the actual church building is still there. Someone's living in it now. But that's the first place I met Jesus, in a Sunday school that I went to. But I didn't continue with that. I chose a more secular life. So I went to school and went to high school to senior. And when I was very young, I used to walk up and play the piano. I was very interested in the piano. And apparently as a 4-year-old, I'd walk up and play tunes on the piano, just by ear, just nursery rhymes and Christmas carols, things like that. My father was an accordion player and a harmonica player. And being Scottish, every New Year's Eve, it was always a big party, and Dad would get the accordion out and everyone would sing along and have a good time. So that probably influenced me a lot to walk down the music path, which is what I did. So the years went by, and having no parents, of course, I was moving around between siblings for about 3 or 4 years, and by the time I was 16, I was out by myself. So I was looking at different options. So one of the first things that I did was consider joining the army. It was a good lifestyle, I thought. Everything was provided. So I didn't actually join, but I was in the Army Cadets. And the photo you see behind me is actually me as an officer in the Army Cadets. And this is 1976, I think it was. Yeah, 76. And that was the showers we used to shower in on the Army Cadet camps up at Greenbank. I considered that lifestyle for about probably 10 minutes, and I thought, no, it's not really for me. I enjoyed it. It was good at school. It was a part-time thing. We got to fire rifles and things like that and learn some discipline. But it really wasn't the lifestyle for me. But during my time, I was always playing music, having a bit of fun with it. And even though I'm a keyboard player mostly, one of the first instruments I was given was a guitar, actually by my mother when I was about 10 years old. And I did play a bit of guitar for a while, and that picture on the top left was actually me when I was about 17 with some friends. And that picture at the bottom in the middle was actually one of the first restaurants we played at when I was about 19. And that's me on my keyboards there when I was about 19 or 20. So I very much got into the music side of the fence. Sorry, I've got a bit of an echo coming through here. This is all actually the radio, is it? That's strange. Anyway, so from there I developed and joined more bands, and I actually joined a band called Mango Bop, and we were playing at all the hotels around Brisbane and the Gold Coast, North Coast, Toowoomba, everything. And that became pretty much a bit of a full-time thing for me. I was a keyboard player and a singer in a band. I wasn't the lead singer, but I did sing lead quite often. So that was one of the bands I was in. And then after that, I decided to go and work on the island resorts for a while. So I worked over on island resorts because I was able to play music, earn a good living, but also have a great time. My main objective was making sure the house guests were having as much fun as I was, basically. So it was a good lifestyle for a 23-year-old. That's us as dressed up as a Blues Brothers band, and that was the Island Resort. Now, avert your eyes for the next pictures. This will shock you. That's me, obviously, dressed up for some party night on the Island Resorts. I was 23 and apparently had great legs. So that was what we did. We just entertained the people and had a good time. So I was very much into it. And then by about 85, I joined a fairly serious band called The Breaks. This band had some serious players in it, some people in the industry. Now, we always joked about being rock gods. We never really thought ourselves as rock gods, but we always considered that we were trying to be a rock god and be popular with the people. So we had film clips, and we were on TV and on radio and touring around the country. And it was a lot of fun, I must admit. I won't deny we had a good time doing it. And even this, I'll just play this in the background. I'll turn this down.
No one's got an answer. No one in view. Day in, day out, always on the turnabout, talking to you. And if you can't hear me, here's what you do. You gotta get up, down, and up. Shake, shake, up, down, and up. Straight, up, down, and up.
And of course, the 80s, the hairstyles were always an interesting thing with the hair perms. That was me playing on Hamilton Island. Got to meet people like George Harrison, had a house on Hamilton Island from the Beatles. So we actually got to meet some very interesting people, supported some very big international bands like Jethro Tull, got to meet Billy Joel, people like that. So it was a very interesting career, I must admit. And some of those people are lovely people. Some are Christian, some aren't. At the time, I wasn't. I wasn't an atheist, but I call myself agnostic, I suppose, in those days. I thought there was a greater power, but really wasn't interested. So that's where we were going. That redhead guy is actually Barry Crocker's son. I was in a band with him in Sydney called Undercover. And as you can tell from the hairdos and the outfits, we used to make up those coats and make them pretty. So we're chasing this lifestyle that really doesn't have a meaning or an end. It's just a day-to-day thing. And as a 25-year-old, 26-year-old, it was a lot of fun. It was me with a bit of a beard, different views. I was doing piano bars, things like that. And I had a band called Era, and that was 3 singers and myself on keys, and that was a lot of fun doing that. We had all the different eras from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Again, it was a great lifestyle, a lot of fun, but it was still missing something in my life. And then suddenly, there's something I needed appeared, and that's Caroline. Some of you know Caroline, and Caroline's my wife. We actually met in about 2000. Caroline's also a singer-songwriter, and I won't go through the whole method of how we met, but we did meet through the industry, I suppose. Caroline met me, and it took me a while to convince her that actually I was the guy to marry, for 2 reasons. One, I did marry when I was 28 for 2 years. Had no children. We got married. It didn't work out. We went our separate ways. Thankfully, we had no children at the time, and it was just one of those things. She decided she was too young to get married, so I was single. But actually, through a coincidence, through my first wife, I met someone who introduced me to Caroline. So you could say I met Caroline through my first wife, which is very bizarre. So we met Caroline, and at the time, Caroline was a Christian, and I wasn't, and I really didn't want much to do with it. So here's Caroline looking at a picture of someone who was divorced and a non-Christian and was asking her to marry her. And of course, she said no 3 times to me. I asked her 3 times. And during that time, thankfully, Caroline introduced me to Dr. Desmond Ford. And she said, Des has just come back from America, and he's now semi-retired. He's probably the busiest retired person I know. And she was speaking in a Brisbane tabernacle. And Caroline said, I'd love you to come and see this guy speak. I think you would appreciate him. So I thought, well, I've got nothing to lose, so I may as well. So I went into the tabernacle and sat through the sermon. And at the end, Caroline looked at me and said, so what do you think? And I think my reply was, I could listen to him again. So something about Des, his way of delivery, his way of speaking, the intellect mixed with the heart, touched me. And it was the first time in my life where someone who had presented the gospel to me in a format that made sense. Because all the time, all I saw was the hypocrisy through my life, and particularly in the industry I worked in, it was always very, keep away from that, keep away from that. So it was the first time that I actually did. So thanks to Des, 2002, Caroline did finally say yes, because I was leaning towards becoming a Christian. It wasn't because of Caroline I became a Christian at all. It was just a benefit that I did, because Des was definitely the one who brought me to Christ. So in 2002, Carol and I were married, and this is actually 10 years later. Des came and we renewed our vows. That's a great picture there because that includes our first daughter, Sienna, and of course Des himself and Caroline and I. And it was before Grace came along, but of course now Grace came along 3 years later. So thankfully, the path led me to Caroline, which led me to Des, which led me to Christ. So now, 15 years as a Christian, I became involved with GNU, and as you probably all know, I'm now one of the directors on the board and involved with the production of the stuff that we do. And it's been very exciting watching it grow over the last 2-3 years. I've been working, and since Ellie's joined, we've changed direction, but it's still all about the gospel. So the one quote that Des has always said, which to me is probably one of the biggest quotes and thankful quotes, is this one: Jesus accepts me as I am, but he never leaves me that way. Thank you very much.
To help you understand God's Word in a whole new way, go to goodnewsunlimited.com. You can sign up there to get your free devotional delivered to you each day. This program has been paid for by the partners and friends of Good News Unlimited. Word spreads fast.